As a Christian working woman, you have many roles, from your responsibility with family and friends to community and work. How do you connect all that you do with all that you are and still have your faith shine through? It's a challenge, but you are up to it. The She Works for Him podcast is the gathering place to empower Christian working women to live out their calling at work by connecting them to God, resources, and each other through powerful faith stories from other working sisters in Christ. Welcome to She Works for Him.
You've tuned into She Works for Him, where we connect Christian working women to God, resources, and one another. And we are your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Katherine Gates. And today, I am just thankful that you are here with us. And I just was noticing it's Valentine's Day, and I just want to celebrate that because we have love that can be celebrated in so many different ways. Yes, maybe it is a made-up holiday, but it is worthy of having an excuse to actually express our love to other people around us and to our Heavenly Father. So happy Valentine's Day to everybody. And I just want to remind you that you can connect with us on sheworksforhim.com and all of our social media. It's sheworks4him. You can actually watch the interviews on YouTube. So we hope that you'll subscribe there, as well as Instagram and Facebook. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or things that you want to talk about on the show. That's what we're here for. So sheworksforhim.com is our website.
Our careers and lives don't always unfold the way we expect when we start out. As scripture tells us, we can make plans, but it's the Lord who orders our steps. While planning is a good thing, we need to hold our plans loosely and seek God and obediently follow His leading. When Shelley Simpson took her first position with J.B. Hunt Transport as customer service rep almost 28 years ago, she thought it was a temporary assignment. She not only had no idea that this would be the company she would grow with, she couldn't have imagined just how far that growth would take her. It hasn't always been an easy road. There have been tough decisions to make after Shelley and her husband, David, started a family, and hard boundaries to set as she sought to honor God, her husband, and her responsibilities to her family and her job. But Shelley is the poster child for bloom where you're planted. Today, Shelley is the Chief Commercial Officer and EVP of People and HR for J.B. Hunt. It's a demanding role that her relationship with the Lord carries her through. Shelley, welcome to She Works for Him.
Well, thanks, Katherine. I think I got slightly emotional. It was like you were reading my final ending. But it was great. Thank you.
Well, it's been such an inspiration to watch you the last several years, and we've known each other for a while through my time at Workmatters. And we're going to get into how you connect your faith and your work. But would you briefly share with our listeners, how did you become a Jesus follower?
Well, I was raised by a mother that was raised by two very strong Christians. So my grandparents both came to know the Lord after they got married, and they raised their children in church. My grandfather was the deacon, and my grandmother was a homemaker. And so my mother grew up playing the piano in church from the age of 13 on. And so from the youngest I can remember, I was always in church, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And so I attribute my grandparents because they were really the start of people knowing faith, but it was my mom's faithfulness. I grew up in a household that was not equally yoked. And so my dad did not know the Lord, but my mother, every single Sunday night, Wednesday night, any kind of revival, we were there. And so I think it was just her being present and faithful that I came to know the Lord at the age of 9. And I remember that day because that was the day that changed my life.
That's amazing. It's amazing how the Lord puts the right people and just guides your path in that way. And your career journey has been amazing. Can you share a couple of the highlights as to how you went from customer service rep, which I know you've shared before, you thought was going to be temporary, to that now Chief Commercial Officer and EVP of People in HR?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the highlights in my career, I look at you said steps are ordered. I totally believe that. And so God has placed me in a position of leadership, and I just happen to be the Chief Commercial Officer inside the organization. But, the highlights in my career are the relationships that I've built and those that I'm closest to. And so when I look at some of my very favorite people I work with every single day, And we're in an unusual organization where people come here and stay a really long time. And so the people that I work directly with, probably the average tenure is 15 to 20 years. So that's a long time of building relationships. I have seen them have babies, get married, grow up. They've seen me do the same. So I look back on the relationships that we formed as the most success that I think I've had in my career. Those are my highlights. Overall, all the other things are really just the vehicle or the avenue into building those relationships.
When you talk about that longevity and building those relationships over time, you get to know those people and people are getting to know you. Mm-hmm. And with your faith as a component, as who you are, your faith is a part of that. How has that influenced not only how you approach those relationships, but also like the decisions you're making in your career?
Well, I mean, I do think that when I very first started in the company, that was almost 28 years ago. I can't say that I was as strong in my faith, although I was early in accepting the Lord. When I'm first starting out, I'm just trying to figure out how to get from being an hourly employee to paying my bills, paying off debt. And I'd really separated work from my faith. And as I got older and really when I went part-time, and took a step back from the organization, that's really when my faith moved forward and became more integrated into my work. So it's been the last 15 years of my career that I've really just thought about, what? The Lord knows what I'm capable of doing and what I'm not capable of doing, but He is sufficient and He will guide me and help me along the way. One of the things that my husband said to me was, Shelley, you're so afraid to talk about your faith at work. I remember him telling me that. And I really had to pray about that because I thought, well, I don't want to, press my beliefs on someone. And I remember my prayer when I came back full time. And it was my girls were 2, my son was 4. And I remember saying, Lord, if you will bring them to me, I will open my mouth. And that's really what started my conversations, really about where I'm at in faith and where they're at, whether that's somebody saying I'm really struggling and eventually the conversation leads to a prayer or just me telling them that I'll pray for them, or it can also just be in my everyday actions. I really try to focus hard on being a good witness when I'm in a leadership or even in a friendship here at work.
You took that intentional step and had that conversation with the Lord, right? And said, just bring them to me and opening those doors. So are there any resources or tools that you use that you could share with the listeners that help you in your daily walk, especially connecting your faith there at work?
Well, there's a company called Workmatters that I was on the board for 9 years. And that was an important, it was so good in my timing of when I needed Workmatters and hopefully when Workmatters could use me. And I grew with Workmatters and they grew with me. And there's a resource, workmatters.org, where you can get insight and valuable information. I think that was helpful. But also just the regular tools that we use. I'm a big reader on the topic or what I want to look at for the day. I'm not huge on reading lots of books, but I'm big on reading. And so that's something I try to educate myself on a regular basis. My inspirational books are always faith-led. And so I love self-help books, but I love self-help books that are going to be closer to faith than something else.
Yeah. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we're going to be right back after just a short break. But Shelley, when we come back, we just want to dig a little deeper into even just this conversation about Work Matters. So you're listening to She Works for Him, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work for Him, She Works for Him, and I Retire for Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your co-hosts Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. We're here today with Shelley Simpson. And Shelley, you have 28 years you've been at J.B. Hunt. I mean, that is in and of itself says so much about the work environment there. Like you said, there's a lot of longevity. And you've shared just a little bit about what that has looked like for you. And we want to go a little bit deeper. But Catherine, go ahead with your next question.
Yeah, Shelley, you mentioned Workmatters, and that's where you and I got a chance to meet and get to know each other better. You've been a speaker at Workmatters events, and you've also been very involved in the Workmatters Institute and mentoring women. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to invest your time into that program?
Well, it's probably one of the most meaningful places that I spend my time. Not only do I think I am giving back and helping young Christian women that are probably going to walk through similar scenarios that I have, but it also encourages me, it refreshes me, and they coach me as well. So although they might only be in their career for 5 to 15 years, it's refreshing to hear their hunger and how they want to move forward. And so I'm on year 7 right now of mentoring a group. And actually today I have them coming in as well a little bit later. So I'm getting ready to wrap up with this group, which is always a very bittersweet moment, but it's like an alumni group that I get to keep in contact with. I have seen miracles performed at our table. I've seen wombs open, relationships restored, marriages thriving. It has been a miraculous time for me to watch. And every time I'm so excited to see what the Lord's going to do in that process. And of course, not just with them, but with me also.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit? I think a lot of people think about mentoring as more one-on-one, but this is small group mentoring. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and why small group mentoring is beneficial?
Well, I don't believe there's just one mentor, at least here on earth, that can give us all the advice that we need. And so when I think of even my own mentoring that I need, it's in a certain area or it's around certain subjects. And when we can gather a group of people together, a lot of times they have the same questions for me. So the first 2 or 3 sessions that we have, they're wanting to know similar things. And so we'll go through that. But what happens by maybe the 4th or 5th session, because we do it once a month, they start answering each other's questions. They start realizing that they are in community and they have shared so much deeply in those very trusted relationships that by the end, I get to do a lot of listening and I get to watch the student become the teacher. And so I feel like that's really important as you move forward, because now that group of people, they went through discussions that likely they're not going to be sharing with other people, but they have that common bond together.
And that's really discipleship and mentoring at its finest, when you build those relationships, when you tear down the walls and you really get real with each other. And there's not a lot of places for that. As much as we think that there must be, everybody has a place like that, a lot of people don't take advantage of it. So being a leader in that group must just be so impactful for all of the different women. Like you said, bittersweet. You've seen them grow, but it's time to launch, and it's time for that next for them to go out, and hopefully they'll pay it forward as well. So specifically as a Christian working woman, when you look at your career, what do you think has been one of your biggest struggles? And then I do want to go, I'm not just cup half empty, but cup full as well with the victory. But in an area where maybe as a Christian working woman, it was extra hard.
Yeah, well, it had to do a lot with personal, because when I first had Peyton, who is 20, back in 2001, I really felt like I wanted to be at home full time. I was going to take a step back from the organization. I had not intended to do that for a long period of time. I'd been with the company long enough that I loved the company. I was just going to take a step back until my children reached school age. And it was really that moment that I walked into my boss's office, that when I went to give notice, that he stopped me and said, listen, I want you to go home, focus on Peyton, and you can be a great mom, a great wife, and be a great worker, and whatever that means, we'll work it out. And that might not be meaningful to anybody else, but it was one of the biggest spiritual markers in my life. And it's because it set me in motion on a journey with the Lord. That I had been taught from my grandmother that God will give us the biggest desires of our heart. My biggest desire was to be a really great mom and be a great wife and a great Christ follower. And I just didn't think that work could happen along with that. It was my level of confidence more than anything. And so God and I wrestled for about 6 months to a year as to who was going to be right in the end. I stayed obedient. That's the one thing I did right. I can't say I was super happy through the process, but I did stay obedient. And what I learned over time, now I'm on the other end where I have Peyton that's 20. My girls just turned 18. And I look back now and you know what? I was able to fulfill. And so God did give me the greatest desire of my heart. It's just not always in the way that we expect it to happen. And I was so set on how it was expected to happen in my heart. But I look back now and I'm so thankful that I was faithful. It was difficult, but you know what? It all worked out.
You know, what do you say to the employers out there that don't have that mindset of, freeing the employees to do what they feel called to do in this? It almost sounds to me like because it was such a great experience for you and you had that freedom, you were released so that you wanted to come back in the right capacity at the right time for you. What do you say to the employer that goes, I just need my people to work?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not going to be in business very long. It's just not the environment anymore. And that's not just for women, that's for everyone. We're all going to go through seasons in life. I just happened to walk through 2 deaths in the family in the last 3 weeks. And we're going to go through that in life. There are seasons in life where there's trying to be a new mom or aging parents, or just maybe I'm just struggling myself. There are going to be seasons in life that we as leaders have to work through with our people. We are in relationship. And so this isn't just work. People that say leave work at work and home at home either have never worked or don't have a home life. And I just don't think that's a reality. And so living an integrated life is super important. But as leaders, understanding that people are people. If they're happy at home, they're happy at work and vice versa. I think that's probably the number one thing to look at.
And Shelley, you've done such a great job of feeding into the next generations, of mentoring others. Are you getting support and encouragement somewhere for you in your walk?
Well, it's amazing to me the people that I'm surrounded by. I have a lot of strong faith walkers that I didn't know at the time, but over time in a relationship, whether that's in my friendship groups or even here at work, that are strong in their faith. And so I'm able to go and have those conversations, those private emotional connections that I need to walk with. And also my church. I think the church has done a great job pouring into me as a leader. They're constantly thinking about how they can help better equip.
That's good wonderful. Because leaders need to have a place that's safe to go and do that. So we've been talking with Shelley Simpson, and she has a longtime career at J.B. Hunt, and we'll be right back. You're listening to She Works for Him with your co-hosts Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. We'll be right back.
As women, we like to share our special finds with others. That new little shop we just discovered, or a favorite brand that is having a sale. Well, I have a special find for you. The Awaken Podcast Network is a collection of podcasts gathered onto a digital platform with you in mind. No more searching and wondering if the content is relevant. The work has already been done. Awaken Podcast Network even has smaller collections of podcasts focused on specific topics, including a collection called She Works for Him, dedicated to content for Christian working women. So go ahead, unlock God's purpose for your work, and check out awakenpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to She Works for Him, where we're interviewing Shelley Simpson from J.B. Hunt and about her longtime career and how she has just followed the Lord obediently, even when it didn't look the way she wanted it to. Shelley, I just appreciate your wisdom and how freely you shared it. I've seen that happen time and time again with, local groups that we've done with women here. And one thing that's always impressed me is how you are able to set boundaries that support you in maximizing your effectiveness at work, but also the presence that you have with people in your life. What's your strategy for navigating that all well?
Well, I would say first, Catherine, I am huge on living my life with my personal mission statement. So for me, I want to create an eternal impact in leadership by serving people, loving others, and being a good witness while integrating my faith, family, work, and community. And it's easy for me to say because it's what I think about constantly, how I can be intentional on making sure that I live a life that was intended for what I wanted to have accomplished. And so I kind of start there. I'm a big goal setter according to that. At the beginning of the year, that's something I try to set up. And then it's how I really set up the framework for my day. How I tactically handle that is really through my calendar. And so I am pretty big on my integration, that when I say live an integrated life, it's so that I don't compartmentalize anymore, but it really is my faith is first, my family is second, my work is third, and community is fourth. And I'm constantly thinking about that. People know me for that. And so I'm pretty firm that if I have something going on in my personal life that I just can't miss because it's a priority for me, I'm not going to miss it. I have found when I open up at work and either tell my customers or people that need me to do something after hours, when I share with them, gosh, my son has a football game, normally they'll be very supportive. What happens is often we're too scared to say whether we can or can't in fear of what someone might think. What I found, it's very liberating for the people that I'm having those conversations with.
Not only are you consistent and they respect that, but then it gives them a role model for practicing it in their own lives and freedom to do so, right?
Well, certainly, because I want them to do the exact same thing.
Right.
So for me, again, work, I say that here when I'm talking, is work should never be your number one priority. There will be times when it will become a priority in the moment, but it should never be your number one priority.
That's so good.
And having a leader like you vocalizing that allows other people to reevaluate their own lives. And maybe that'll make them think deeper, even about the spiritual things that they may not be thinking about when they start thinking about priorities. So you were sharing so much about the mentoring that you're doing. Pretend like for a moment that you are mentoring the people listening to this podcast right now. What is something that you would say to that next generation of Christian working women that are going to follow in your footsteps? How can they be better prepared for their life ahead?
Well, I would say don't follow in my footsteps. Follow in the footsteps that you believe are best and most appropriate for your walk with the Lord. And He will guide you through that. And if I'd only known very young in my career that it wasn't just work and that it was relationships that I was building that would then lean into and eventually create what I have today, which is just abiding and connecting with other followers, it would change the way I viewed work in the very beginning. I think it's so key that people watch what we do. They watch how we act. It's not really what we say, but how we act. And I think if I had known that young in my career, to really step forward and be bold about what was important to me and what wasn't, and to look at it more than just coming into work, I would have made a much greater impact much sooner in my career.
But you're able to pass that baton on by just sharing that in conversations like this for the next to learn from. We all have those things where we're like, if only I had known this sooner. So this is that opportunity to share that now. Shelley Simpson, thank you so much for sharing with us on She Works for Him, just a little about what God has done in your career journey and how He has taught you lessons. It has not always been easy, but remaining faithful has been a theme throughout it. Shelley, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. We're Christian working women helping other Christian working women to live out their calling at work as she works for Him.
As Christian women, we have many roles, from daughter, sister, friend, wife, and mother to analyst, accountant, executive, or educator. Is it possible to balance our roles at work and home in a way that honors God? The answer is yes, and our new book, She Works for Him, will help show you how. Written to celebrate, encourage, and equip women in the workforce, She Works for Him discusses the diverse experiences of today's Christian working woman. Pick up a copy by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore. You've been listening to the She Works for Him podcast with your hosts, Catherine Gates, Nadia Dixon, and Martha Brangenberg. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube under She Works for Him. And to access any of the resources we mentioned on today's show, see the show notes at sheworksforhim.com. That's sheworks4him.com. This podcast was created to empower you to live out your calling at work so the world knows she works for Him.